Friends, today's NRI Summer program from Los Angeles brought to you commercial free by listeners like you. Your generous donations make possible for us to stay commercial free, and today's show is pre-recorded. If you have a question for the guest, please send an email to nrisamay@gmail.com. We will follow up with the guest and find the answer for you. Thank you for your support.
So I interviewed some of the folks on the NRI Summer, like Sandeep Pandey and Brigadier Ganesh Pogula. You probably heard of those names as well. And there are two things I learned from these guys. One is that there is a lot of innovation in villages, probably more than what we have in a corporation, and also that they're used to a sustainable living. So if you agree to that, what is the need for an intervention from AID or any other organization to go and try to help them?
Yeah. So firstly, I think the idea of AIDS intervention is not only to help the villages, but to see that both the villages and we people are part of the same, system. And it's not like the problems are located in the village and the solution is located with us. But policies, that affect us and them together have caused an oppressive system wherein certain sections of the society are not developing as they naturally should because they are being exploited or oppressed. So that is the way to look at it. Oftentimes, oppression of villages comes in the form of displacement, for example, right? So a lot of tribal villages in India, maybe if they are left alone, do not need much intervention other than, an intervention of give and take, where naturally we learn from them and they learn from us. But then if these villages are being displaced unjustly through projects where they were not consulted, that do not benefit them, and which are of dubious nature, then then the question comes. Then the thing is that are we going to let that continue, or do we, as civil society organizations and people, want to intervene? So that's the kind of thing that AID is looking at. Even in something like education, for example, our friends working in Tamil Nadu, Balaji and Ravi Shankar were, telling the other day that 99% enrollment is there in schools in all over India, not only in Tamil Nadu, of children under grade 5. And government school teachers are paid like even 5 to 10 times more salaries than private schools in these villages or in these regions. Yet 50% of the children are not able to read. So what's the reason for that? Is it, if the program was working properly, there was no need to intervene. But if it is not, despite so much money being spent by the government, and despite the children actually going to school, if the quality of learning is so poor, then we would have to find out, as a nation, we would need to figure out whether this is the kind of, education our children would get, or can they expect better? And that's all we are doing.
Great. Actually, that's a good segue to my next question. So, Ravi, you mentioned about, you gave the education as an example. I'll give you one more example. The government of Andhra Pradesh, they signed some controversial GOs in the last term. And because of that, now we know that mining leases, basically, there's some tribal villages, they are getting kicked out. These are illegal because of the Schedule 5 Act that we have. So what I'm trying to say is there is some of these issues are coming from policy, maybe more than some. They're coming because of a bad policy. So if the problem is with the bad policy, I know you work supporting these folks who got displaced, but are you also fighting with the government saying, hey, why you have to cancel these leases that are illegally assigned?
See, in general, I think it's not just AID. So AID, as well as several, several civil society organizations and village people facing problems or requiring people to act together, I think there is a collaboration. So aid, there is a collaboration that happens naturally, just like for any program that you would take in your work life. Like there is a collaboration between several people or several teams or several organizations. It is the same with this kind of thing. So yes, so there will be. I think I don't know what particular issue you are referring to, but if the issue is of displacement, which is not just, then I think usually the first struggle towards that comes actually from the villagers themselves. If supposing they are being kicked out, then the village people will stand up. Then there will also be some social workers or activists whom they may have approached or who take interest in that, as well as lawyers who who are interested in filing public interest litigation for such causes, who a lot of times give their time free, and journalists who write about these kind of issues, people like you who talk about them in the radio, organizations like AID who also mobilize their volunteers to look at these issues and maybe write to the government or play a supportive role. I think it's what you will find is essentially a network of groups starting from the village person and all the way, that connects various people is required for tackling any issue. Oftentimes, policies affecting a village, in India could be made in Washington D.C., for example. So therefore, there is a global collaboration that is often needed.
Absolutely. Aravinda, I have a question for you. P. Sainath, I'm pretty sure you heard of him, the rural journalist. He was on NRI Summer, and he was talking about the lifestyle in villages, and he said they don't have they don't have any rights in villages. They don't have access to food or education or hospital or libraries. A lot of things that we take for granted. You have seen how our villages are. Can you share your thoughts on this?
Well, I was thinking also about your earlier question about sustainable lifestyle in the villages, and you were asking, since there is a lot of sustainability already built into the village lifestyle, what is the role of an organization like AID? And I think that we should understand that AID doesn't see that our role is to help somebody else become sustainable. I think sustainability by nature includes all of us. There's no division of us and them. And when we think of ourselves, the people like me and other people who join AID, what would we need to do to make our own lives sustainable? What would we need to do to pay the true cost? And this connects to the question you just now asked me about the resources and facilities available in the villages. If we look at any of the things that we have, be it our food or our clothing, it all gets traced back to the labor and resources that have come from a village. But look at the working conditions or the access to resources that the people in the villages, whether they're farmers or weavers or other tradespersons who are producing all the things that we consume, they would not even be able to buy the food that they're selling in the market. The people weaving the khadi clothes cannot afford to buy khadi. The people who are growing, the rice that gets marketed in Bombay as the top quality rice, either due to its variety or because it's grown without pesticides and therefore comes under the organic label. I don't know how many of the farmers who are working in those fields and growing those rice are able to afford them. There are very few distribution networks that take into account the lifestyle of the producers and try to ensure that the producer gets a fair deal, is able to afford what they're selling, and is able to is able to meet their own development aspirations. One of the reasons that many of the poor don't have access to health or education facilities or rations or any of the basic government services is that they don't even have an address. I mean, it's really mind-boggling that the address is still considered a requirement to access government services when the majority. I don't know. I will go ahead and say that the majority of people are not fixed. The majority of the poorest of the poor are not fixed to a specific address. Even if they are not displaced, they're migrating in search of work a part of the time. And so during those seasons when they're in one place, they can't get the services in another place, and it creates a lot of havoc. Programs like National Rural Employment Guarantee, which try to increase the number of work days that the people can get, had this aim in mind that they would be able to reduce migration. And so when people have a stable home and are receiving a living wage, that's when they can not only access the full material resources, but also fully participate democratically in making decisions for the village, taking part in village level processes. This is the vision with which these kind of laws, like NREGA Act and the kind of institutions like Gram Sabha and Panchayati Raj, these are the kinds of things that they envision, full democratic participation, so that the people are empowered to solve all of these problems for themselves.
Friends, NRI Summer is a non-profit independent alternate media from Los Angeles, USA, which brings positive stories from grassroots activists from all corners of India and across the world. NRI Summit does not rely on corporate funding, and our shows are commercial free. We only rely on your donations. Corporate funded media is driven by the TRP rating, and profits are blurring the distinction between news and entertainment. Why do our news channels talk so much about cricket, movies, accidents, popular figures' personal lives, babies of heroines, gossips, etc., while they should be covering the struggles of people, inequality in our society, rural issues, and border security issues? Why did our media raise some corruption crusaders to the sky on one day and shut them off completely when graft charges were raised on those corporate sponsors? Media relies so much on the corporate funding and government blessings that they cannot report independently. NRI Summer is different. We don't accept funds from any corporations, and hence our shows are commercial free. We completely rely on donations from you. Please consider donating to NRI Summer, and please go to NRISamay.com and donate generously. This is the only way together that we can continue NRI Summer. All donations are kept transparent on NRISamay.com. And if you have any questions, please write to nrisamay@gmail.com.
Can you tell me, I know you are here, both of you are here for the AID National Annual Conference, right? Is it annual? And what other things are you doing? What did you see from the participants, the energy levels, and what are you asking, either from the current volunteers or the listeners on NRI Summit?
Well, AID, the annual conference, is an opportunity for volunteers in the U.S., who are working, mainly based out of the U.S., who are working in different states, to come together once a year. And all of our volunteers, they pick usually the long weekend, and instead of doing other things like going out with their families on vacation or something, they actually are plan in advance, and they like to come and meet other volunteers of AID, and it kind of inspire one another. We also have some guest speakers from India. This time there was Dr. Ramanjanelu, who works with the Center for Sustainable Agriculture in Hyderabad, and he's been one of our strong collaborators on the agrarian crisis issue, and he was also recently on Satyameva Jayate program that was hosted by Amir Khan. So he was one of the guest speakers at the conference, and we had a panel discussion which involved both him and Kiran Visa from our organizations gone back to India to work on these issues, in Andhra Pradesh, as well as a couple of Americans who are working in the U.S. On similar issues. And it was an interesting panel where we discussed at an international level, what kind of problems can come if genetically modified crops are introduced without labeling, for example, without giving a choice into various countries. And as you know, this is a very controversial issue, and it was interesting to hear perspectives from different places. So similarly, we had other speakers, and also the conference is an occasion for aid volunteers to organize their fundraising ideas, their project goals. It's also a time when the annual report of aid is presented. This time it was very interesting because there are a lot of children in the aid conference. So the aid started off as an organization by graduate students way back in '91. Now it has both students as well as working people, and several of our volunteers now have children, and these children also attend some of these talks, and they already, like a lot of children in aid, develop the perspective of eating organic food, or of doing something meaningful. And so we are making also children friends across chapters, among aid volunteers. So it's a good event where you do something meaningful, and hopefully also that brings about, like Aravinda said, we don't only think about bringing a change in India, but also in our own lifestyles, and generally the energy levels are very high when like-minded people, like it's almost like each volunteer sets a standard for the other volunteer, and that kind of standard setting is needed, for things that we want to do, because the challenges that aid is trying to address require a quality effort of high standard.
I think a lot of aid volunteers, when they're outside of the conference, when they're just at their office or at their college, if, for example, if they take their own glass and they don't use paper cups in the office, or if they don't use water bottles or something, people might look at them like they're odd. And if they try to convince somebody else why this is a good idea, then they may not always get a fair hearing. But then when they come to the conference, they can meet other people who may be doing things like this, or doing other things to save water, or save energy, or eat local food, or any of these kinds of things that try to put us in closer touch with the source of our food and other resources, and to make our lives more sustainable. So we get ideas and we get encouragement from one another. And I would also like to just add to the point that Ravi made about the children attending the conference, because in the past, I think it's not been that easy. Very active volunteers, after they become parents, find it difficult to handle both the new responsibilities and maintain their activity level in aid. And so, but then when there's a critical mass of more parents and families, then it just becomes more normal, and everybody benefits from that, and we can retain more diverse viewpoints. And then instead of again, having the majority of volunteers be young students, maybe not married or not having children, we can have a far greater diversity, as people move through different stages of life. And one more point I wanted to bring up about the conference. One of our keynote speakers was Dr. Ilina Sen, who is a professor of women's studies in Chhattisgarh. She's currently at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And she talked about women's issues in India. And then we were also fortunate to have Dayamani Badla, who is an Adivasi journalist and activist, and of course, very, very active, leader of the movement in Jharkhand, in which women also play an active role. Because she came to New York to receive an award, we were able to also have her attend the conference. And while hearing about all of these struggles in India, we also recognize that the struggle for women's equality and gender issues is not limited to the poor or the displaced people, or what we call who are often called the marginalized people, but we like to call them the people who are central to the process of change. But these issues affect us too, and so some of the sessions in the conference were dedicated to understanding how issues of gender equality persist even among the educated and the well-to-do. And so it was a session that generated a lot of introspection and brought up
Actually,
issues.
that's one of my questions I wanted to ask later, but anyway, because you brought it up, and because you saw so much of U.S. and you saw so much of urban life even in India and also the rural side. So what is the difference in the way it impacts women in these various places, from uneducated folks or the rural folks to the urban people and so-called developed areas? Where is the significance, or even are they comparable?
I mean, I think the women's movement contains many, many threads, and in some places, women may be progressing on some threads more easily than others or more effectively than others. I think that the basic women's rights perspective has to be at the heart of of any kind. Sometimes just material advancement is mistaken for respect for women's rights. So you might have a situation where a woman is perhaps well educated and well to do, but then there's still a line that's drawn that she may not be able to make her own decisions about, for example, the taboo against menstruation may still be persistent. So the fundamental idea that there's something wrong with a woman's body hasn't gone away just because of educational or career advancement. There may be taboo against widows. There may be, there may be, women may not still have full choice when it comes to marriage or dowry issues. So these are issues that cut across class barriers. Other issues regarding food and, it's of course important to ensure access to food. It's important to ensure economic and educational opportunities. All of those do represent women's rights and women's empowerment. But they're not. If you don't address the core issue of equal dignity for women, then you still haven't finished the struggle. Still has to continue.
Yeah. So I just want to add that even in aid in the U.S., we find, for example, that intercaste marriages, like if supposing somebody wants to marry somebody from a different caste, or issue of dowry coming up even in NRI circles and even among aid volunteers. Oftentimes the dowry issue is so high in the NRI circles that they are the ones who are setting the scale for dowry in India. Like NRIs means this much dowry, non-NRIs means this much, and so on. Or NRIs means this much, and it's a government job this much, it's a collector this much. So the scale of dowry actually is set by the higher end people. The more the education, the more the status, the more secure your job seems, or the higher the dowry. And then by the time it comes to the villages, there is there is also a very high level of dowry that is demanded. So we have volunteers, for example, who take the place that they will not give or take dowry. There are volunteers who whose marriages who have protested against dowry, and sometimes the marriages may or may not have happened. There are volunteers who have protested against intercaste marriages because their parents were not interested, and sometimes they've had to wait a long number of years to convince their parents, that was okay. So these issues are not don't go away just because you're educated, or just because you have a job, or just because you're an NRI or something like that.
Yeah, very good point. It's a good segue to my next question. Aravinda, you are a Jeevan Sati. That means aid is supporting you, and my understanding is you have a pretty simple life, and so do you, Ravi. So then there is a social pressure, right? And there is a pressure maybe from within the relatives, and they could say, hey, you could be doing something else, and you could be making a lot of money, or see your brother is doing so, or your sister is doing so. I'm asking this because, especially for activists, or especially people with the consciousness of, like you said, they're using their own cup instead of using a paper cup. So how do you tackle that? Maybe you can tell from your personal experience. How do you manage that kind of situation, and how big of a challenge is it?
Yeah, I think that depends very much on individuals, and the kind of the relations they're having with their family members, if you're asking. So in our cases, for example, I think our families have largely been supportive. So they do not see the thing is, when you're doing something like this, it's not so much the issue of money, but people are worried that that maybe you're just doing something on a whim or something like that, and a kind of a direction which normally, like what you have studied for, is not that, and therefore why are you doing it? At the same time, I think people also recognize that this is an important direction, and people need to be working in this area, and they also see that they may be concerned in the initial years, but after a while they see that that this is what you want to do, and there are others doing it. Oftentimes they realize that this is not a lonely path, because they see that your colleagues, your friends who are coming to visit you, they also become the friends of your parents, they become the friends of your relatives, other volunteers, other activists. So I think they generally they would be supportive. But of course, it's a very there could be activists who could be also having facing a tougher time convincing their parents. Is also possible.
Yeah, I think from my experience, once they understand that you can be happy with the lifestyle you chose, I think they'll leave you alone. Then tell me more about how you are motivating folks in U.S. Because you are in U.S.
No, I think the question is relevant because, I think your previous question is relevant because it is not only a few people who are doing this. Maybe it's only a few people who are going back from the U.S. and doing it, but there are a lot of people in India who are working passionately for causes too. And there are also a lot of people in the U.S. who are working in the U.S. passionately for grassroots causes, while they could be doing something else which is much more high-paying. So I think, like for example, we had an event yesterday in LA, and Aravinda was talking to one of the volunteers who drove from San Diego to attend our talk, and she was saying that this young volunteer already is thinking, of going back to India and doing these kind of things, in her life. So we find, like, every time we find there are volunteers, like last year, one of our volunteers from Boston, his name is Sata, he went back to India, and he's like totally got involved in in a campaign where he is trying to see, he's trying to stand up for the rights of the workers of the people who are working in brick. A lot of them are working in a situation which you would call bonded labor. So this kind of it is there in a lot of young people, and both who want to go back to India from here, people who stay here and do things here, and those in India themselves. And I think generally people should be supportive of it. Families should be supportive of it.
Yeah, I agree that. I was actually asking how do you motivate people, because there's a lot of core volunteers which they don't need any motivate, they inspire other people, but there can be, when you are going to these meetings, or when you are addressing a broader people, or when you are going to a brand new place and you are talking to somebody, so how do you motivate? Because I ask this because aid is doing a lot of projects and it's huge, but it could be much bigger, right? If you compare with some of the NGOs in U.S. Who are working in similar directions, it could be much bigger. So how do you capture people's imagination and bring them into the organization?
I think that there are a lot of people who are very interested and eager and maybe even desperate to know about work like what AID is doing. Somehow they do find their way to. We had a meeting in Los Angeles, and we had a meeting of community members in Los Angeles, and then afterwards we had a meeting with the students. And in every gathering, we could see how interested they were. During the question and answer session, we got into very involved and detailed discussions. I think that there's a dearth of information, and I'm so happy about your radio program to help fill this void. But I think people really want to know what's really going on, what kind of development work really works, and what for the people, not just on paper or not just something that looks big like for the politicians, but how does it really make a difference on the ground? And I think that when we're there and answering the questions and people get a feeling that they're connected to the real deal, then that's what motivates them.
Yeah. See, I think also.
I'll ask some attached question. You can answer to that too, but I want to add one more question to the same one.
Sure.
I'll tell you one thing. We spoke to a lot of aid volunteers, or even some of the aid Jeevan Sadhis, because they are also working for other organizations or through other organizations. Maybe that could be the reason, but not everybody is talking about aid when they're doing interviews. Maybe it's just what we saw. So my point is, how do you, from the promotion part of it, maybe it's not easy for activists, social activists, but how do you make sure that you go out and try to say this is a platform that you guys should come and join?
Yeah. So. See, one thing I think is that when you're saying that they're working on 2 or 3 different things, I think people actually working in this field wear different hats. So if supposing you're working like in a campaign, like for example, if Kiran was working, he's a core volunteer of AID. He has been in the U.S. since his came to the U.S. in '98 or something for his graduate studies. Since then, he's been a volunteer. And now he's gone back to India, and like us, he's working, on the aid with AID hat. But then when he's also working with, he's also running an organic, project, a project which is linking organic farmers to consumers in Hyderabad, which is in collaboration with CSA, and therefore in that Sahajaram, project that they are working in, he's part of the CSA. He's part of the NGO called CSA in a campaign that he does, with on the GM, issue. Then he's working as a part of the campaign on that, right, which is anti-GM campaign. So I think different, and this is the same with each of us, like there's Aravinda or me or Balaji, like various ones are working with AID. They're also working with other groups and other networks. So that's what you see as different groups. But that again brings us back to this question of how do we motivate more volunteers to join. So yes, we motivate them both to join AID as well as to join the overall cause. So I think there are 2 things that people who want to join and help in these kind of things should recognize. One is they need to work obviously with an organization of few groups, and AID is a good vehicle for people in the US to get connected to. And along with and having connected to AID, you get the opportunity to connect with other grassroots groups as well as other social activists who are working in fields that may be of interest to you. So some of you may be interested in education, some of you may be interested in agriculture, some of you may be interested in alternate energy. So with AID, you can also connect in an area of your interest with, some in aid we had things like focus groups or cells. So basically you can connect with issues, and in each issue you connect with groups working on that issue. So it is like an umbrella platform, you can think. And especially it's a good platform in the U.S. because it's one of the only groups in the U.S. that actually has put all the issues on table, because we don't want to water down the challenge that is there to just education or health. And therefore we are into agriculture, we are into alternate energy, we are into anti-corruption, into human rights, sustainable development, health, education, in multiple issues. So, but the other thing is that people who want to volunteer should also, have self-motivation. Like, things like aid, I would think are vehicles, but the journey is something that you do. So just because you do not have a vehicle or you do not understand the vehicle, you should not stop you from doing the journey. Sometimes you might get into different vehicles to complete your journey. Sometimes you might get into a vehicle that you think needs more pushing, and it could be one of those where volunteers who get into aid are not entirely satisfied with the way it works or with the kind of issues it tackles and want it to do more and tackle more issues. So then you become the vehicle which you become the person who pushes aid into those directions. So but I think finally everybody should remember that the journey is theirs, and these groups and organizations are vehicles. Vehicles are important to complete the journey, but the journey is not because of the vehicle.
Yeah, and I think there's more work needs to be done to let people know that there is this organization even exists. But because once they know, then it's up to them whether they want to join, whether they're motivated or not. But if they don't even know, then that's probably what all of us can do.
I think NRI Summer has done an excellent job in for example, like I've heard some of the interviews that you have made. I think you've interviewed some people from AID as well as our collaborators, and it's helped AID actually get more visibility.
Friends, NRI Summer is a non-profit independent alternate media from Los Angeles, USA, which brings positive stories from grassroots activists from all corners of India and across the world. If you have any interesting episode you would like NRI Summer to cover, we will be happy to do so. NRI Summer would also like to encourage amateur journalists who have a flair for highlighting current events. You can be part of our citizen journalist team. You could cover an important event, interview victims of an atrocity, or document an inspirational story. The idea is to have a mix of experience throughout all parts of the world, preferably supported by an audio or a video clip of your story to be aired, which will be the curtain raiser. You can also submit your opinion articles on important topics to NRI Summer. We will be happy to put it on NRISamay.com in the opinion section. All your work will be credited only to you. And if you're interested, please send an email to nrisamy@gmail.com.
I'll ask one question now. I think some of my NRI friends will get probably mad at me, but I'll ask anyway because it's kind of bugging me for a while. So a lot of folks like me who are working in US, we are working in big corporations, and some of these corporations are actually rule breakers. So not every corporation is bad, but some of the big ones are, I call them rule breakers. And now we are buying into the corporate lifestyle that we are seeing, and the problem with that is at what cost we are getting, and the cost can be associated to the village folks, which AID is trying to help. So do you see a gap here that people who are trying to, or do you call them, hey, quit these rule-breaking companies and do something else, or come and join us, something like that?
That's a decision that each person has to come to terms with, on their own. I mean, it's not unheard of. There have been volunteers, including aid volunteers, who have changed their lifestyle and including changed their job in order to make it more compatible with their values. I think that that this is a journey, and each of us takes steps towards that. And in some cases, it might be like what you said. It might require you to. You might feel called to change your lifestyle in a radical way, and in some other in other areas, it could be small steps in that direction. Yesterday, in fact, one of the students who was contemplating such a move, very young, and she's not a student actually, she just started a job very recently, and she was saying that within a year that she may be ready to quit and go to work full-time in an interior area. And I just said that you should try to take these steps, you should try to be a little slow and steady with these steps, because you don't want to burn out. You don't want to make a big move all of a sudden and maybe find that you're not up to the challenge, or it wasn't what you thought it would be, or what you tried maybe didn't work out, that you should still have the strength to try something else or to try it again. So to that end, some volunteers have also taken it step by step. Maybe sometime you try it out for a month or maybe 6 months, and then slowly, decide what to do. And there is also a lot of work that volunteers do without necessarily quitting their jobs and or moving to India. So we try to keep the path open for all of these things, and let each person have that let each person make that decision according to their own conscience.
All right.
And also, this is also, I don't know how much to, since I have not worked for these corporations, I don't know how hard or easy it is. But just like, within the government, you could be within the government and be a very honest person trying to change the system. You could be a government officer who is extremely honest and who helps, the cause of the village people. I think even within corporations, you could think of them, if you see that they are violating some rule and you are in that corporation, or if you see they could do better on a pollution aspect or something. I don't know what scope there is to bring such a thing up, like to your board of directors or to the higher authorities within the corporation. But I think those kind of things also are things that people could try. There are, I know, aid volunteers who have tried, some small things like when they've seen that at their workplaces, non-biodegradable cups were being used for coffee and so on. They got that changed, for example. They talked and then they got that changed. So. But of course now, like depending on the corporation and depending on the issues, there's a lot that needs to be done. So I don't know to what extent.
Yeah, and also, if the corporation's main business is something that is you feel that is violating the rules, then that's then you have to make that decision, whether you want to be part of that.
It's like you said, it depends on individual, but I'll just mention maybe one example. For example, there could be a huge financial company, and the main business is to make money for the people, which sounds pretty good, but it could be investing in Africa and trying to grab the lands there. So unless you are conscious and you are trying to understand how exactly this company is making money, which could be really, really complex, you don't even know that your work is actually contributing in one way or the other. Right? But I want to leave it there because it depends on the individual. So Aravinda, let me ask you one question, maybe towards the policy in India. I spoke to Professor Ritika Kera. I think she's from Delhi. She is an expert on food security, and so while we were talking, she was telling Andhra Pradesh as a success story in terms of the PDS. Public distribution system. But I kind of disagreed, and I talked about how many fake white ration cards are there. But beyond that, now the government, at least some of them, are talking about direct money transfer. Given that we know that PDS has issues, Can you tell from your perspective which one is better, or will one of them solve the problems or not?
If we're going to move in any direction regarding the PDS, it should be to increase people's local control over their access to food. Conditional cash transfer is a way of centralizing the resources, and instead of putting food in people's hand, you put cash in people's hand, and then where are they going to get? If the government can't procure the food, in a sustainable way, then I don't think that washing their hands of the whole situation by issuing cash is not something that is any more likely to put food in people's hands. When you first mentioned the success story in Andhra Pradesh, what first came to my mind was the success story in Anantapur district, where the people were able to diversify the grain basket that is given as part of the public distribution system, where everywhere else it's just given rice and wheat. They were able to include ragi, which is, makes the most sense because it's locally grown, and that way the farmer gets a market and the people get a higher quality food. If the direction in which we need to go in order to get to strengthen food security for all the people is land to the tiller and land to the landless. Then they should be able to grow their own food. Not in the direction of cash transfer, where's all that cash going to go? That cash will go into the hands of agribusiness, not in the hands of the local farmer.
Yeah. Let me ask about a contemporary issue that we are seeing right now, which is widely discussed, the Maoist attacks in the Red Corridor in Chhattisgarh and other places. So, it's not safe. It's a pretty dangerous place here. Whether you are an officer or you are a minister, or even if you are a tribal, then your volunteers, you guys are going there and try to help. So, what do you guys see? Because you could be called a Naxal sympathizer and you could be targeted, or you could be seen as somebody coming from outside and you can be targeted by the other side too. So what's your perception on this?
See, I think generally groups have tried to work for a democratic space between the two extremes. That there should be a space for civil society to voice its concerns. Obviously, we have actually been working with a group called ASDS in Andhra Pradesh, which actually is because I think over 200 villages have been affected, literally caught between the crossfire. So there has been internal displacement. People have left their homes and fled, and they have crossed over the border and come into Andhra Pradesh. So this group, ASDS, has been working for their rehabilitation, in the sense that trying to get them NRIJ cards issued and ration cards and electricity connections, and trying to build bridges with the communities in Andhra Pradesh, villages in Andhra Pradesh where the displaced people have settled. So that has been more the focus of aid. So personally, for example, I've never been to Chhattisgarh, but we are also aware of the issue. For example, Binayak Sen, he was arrested and probably on charges of being a Maoist sympathizer, and he's a doctor, and all fake and trumped up charges. So this could, like you say, happen to anybody, and I think anybody who is working honestly and is critical of the government today faces the danger of being, labeled XYZ, like whatever, being put to prison and so on. I think the way the civil society rose to support Dr. Binayak Sen, the 22 Nobel laureates who wrote, to the Prime Minister saying that the allegations against him were not justified, as well as, like a lot of people, a lot of intellectuals, as well as, people from India, And AID also, similarly wrote, like we had a petition drive and so on, collected signatures for this. So I think when this happens, like people, like for an activist, finally people have to believe and support the activist, right? If that does not happen, then I think it is unfortunate. Like if supposing when somebody gets arrested on false charges, and we do not recognize that that's the case, then it's almost that we are blind, and we feel that in our everyday experience, we know how the government is, and we know how social workers are, and if we can't make a call, as in a conflict situation, who is probably saying the right thing? If we cannot make a call, of course the call has to be a call with some knowing and learning about the issue, seeing who else is supporting that issue, maybe visiting the place, learning more, maybe learning more about the problem and so on. But I think the way groups are responding is that there are lawyers coming up for their defense. There are people who are who actively are campaigning, for the release of such activists who are in prison, who continue to be in prison, and I think that that's the support system we have right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you one luxury that we have on NRI Summer. Subhranshu from CG Swara was on our radio a few weeks ago, and he said the conversation that we are having right now, if you are having the same conversation in a tribal area, they can call us Naxal. So I think in a way we are probably lucky, but that explains some of the issues that we are facing. Let me ask Aravinda one question about education. Ravi mentioned that the quality of education is probably not up there as much as enrollment we have. If you have to say, I'll make a couple of changes, minor tweaks, what do you think they should be? And I'm asking because we know that there is lack of, I'm not talking about everybody, but there is a lack of social and political awareness as much as there should be, is my feeling.
Actually, Aravinda had to drop out of the call. So I guess, I can take the question or you can ask me another question. Yeah.
Please.
See, as far as quality of education goes, my own personal feeling has been that, we have had this right to education bill in India recently. However, it has actually not addressed any real issues, that are facing the education crisis in India. I feel that generally schools should cater more to local learning. And there should not be one thing that the Right to Education Bill has done is it has gotten away with exams, so that pressure is not there. However, what it has not done is it did not get away from the concept of a centralized syllabus and a centralized education system, that is pushed on all schools in India at the same time, or all schools in a state. So, but I think learning has to be done much more creatively than that. And we are wasting children and teachers' times if we do not open up, and if we do not cater to. There definitely have to be markers as to what children are learning and how much they are learning at each level. There have to be some goals, but there has to be a lot of freedom for innovation at local level, and for freedom for making the classroom interesting, and for making their own village experience an educational experience. This cannot happen if the textbooks are coming from NCERT or some central source or at the state level. Second thing I feel is that there should be. I think, for example, my personal. I'm just blown away by these statistics. This was just presented by Ravi Shankar, who's working on this at our conference a couple of days ago, and it's still in my mind. That government teachers are paid up to 10 times more than private teachers, and the enrollment is so high. then I think just given these two facts, any scientist, even somebody like our ex-President Kalam, should be able to state that if a child is going to go to school and if the teacher is being paid so much, there is no reason why the learning should not happen. Like it's a closed problem, right? There is no reason. It's not the lack of resources. It's not the lack of willingness of the children to go. And if something is wrong, so he should be able to sign that since these two statistics are true, therefore I expect that in 3 years from now, in all children who are up to grade 5 would learn basic reading, writing, and arithmetic skills. Right? He should be able to state that as a scientist. And I think scientists need to state that and pressure the government to ensure that teachers are performing in schools and that they have the required support, but at the same time there's also the required pressure for teachers to make classrooms interesting as well as the learning has to be measured. I mean, that's what I feel.
Yeah, I work here in US, but I know there are some offshore workers who are in India, and they have done BTech or some higher education, but they are doing like an operator worker, which doesn't need so much education. You only need maybe a 7th grade or a 10th grade, and so that's one of the concerns I noticed. But let me move to a different question. I'll ask you 2 more questions, then I'll give it to you if you want to say anything else. So the first one of those 2 is, you mentioned about Kiran, he's working on organic farming, and Rachna, she's also on NRI, she was also on NRI Summer, she's working on the Bhopal gas victims and other things. Then Balaji is working on education. Then, but for you, which one of the issues are you more, if you can put finger on one, and you can say this is the closest thing for me, or maybe you can use some personal experience.
Yeah, so I've been more interested in power issues in India and alternate technology and appropriate technology. So that has kind of been more of an interest to me. So one of the examples on power let me give you, because I think power is considered, like, for example, how much installed capacity India has, how much China has, how fast is Indian installed capacity growing. This is seen as an indicator of development because essentially power is what empowers the economy. Like having more grid electricity or grid power, grid installed capacity is what drives the growth engine. I mean, this is how it is sold to people, and therefore anything can be done in its name. So I was pretty shocked when I was looking at how much installed capacity India is putting up in its grid every year. If you look at the 5-year plans, you'll know how much. I won't quote an exact number right now because it's not in my mind, but you can just see how much installed capacity was added in the last 5-year plan. You can Google it and get it. And if you divide that by 5, you'll get the amount of megawatts we are installing per year. Then if you look at the what air conditioner industry in India is putting out, which you can also get by Googling, and you see how many new air conditioners are being added in India every year, and you multiply that roughly by 1,000 watts, which is like any AC is roughly 1 kilowatt, then you will get how much capacity of ACs we are installing to consume this power. And these 2 numbers, these 2 figures are roughly the same order of magnitude. And once you kind of factor in a third or so for the fact that the average consumption is about a third of the installed consumption. The average production of electricity is a third of the installed production, right? Once you do that, they're in fact exactly the same, the 2 numbers. So what's happening is that we are installing the grid, saying that it's powering our growth engine. We are, and this is causing, and therefore we are violating environmental laws and social, and people are paying a heavy social cost at displaced villages. But a lot of this energy, bulk of it, is going to just drive air conditioners. In fact, there was also a New York Times article which links these 2. So, so essentially, our grid is growing just to support the air conditioning industry in India. That's what seems to be happening. Now, I might still be okay with it, though I shouldn't. How had I not known that every room in India where the air conditioner is, none of those rooms are insulated. So essentially, all these ACs are doing, it's not like we have ACs working in well-insulated rooms. It's like we have painted our entire room black, and we are just installing tube lights in that room or bulbs in that room to light up the room. And it will be very hard if you do the experiment. If you just paint all the walls black and you have a bulb and you try to read, it will be very hard to do that because like there's no reflected light. And exactly the same thing happens. You run an AC, but then walls are not thermally insulated. Then most of the power is going out. So essentially, most of the installed capacity is just being wasted. It's being wasted. So it's not only running ACs, but those ACs are not running are not running efficiently. And if we raise issues such as this, these are not taken seriously by the Planning Commission, or they are not taken seriously by the governments. But then who is losing out? Right? The country is losing out. So these are some of the issues that I am interested in.
Yeah, that actually brings an interesting thought to me. The projects that you are choosing, are you conscious of the fact that climate is going to change, and some of the work that's been done now it may be irrelevant because of the weather patterns that some scientists are saying that we'll be seeing in a few decades now. So are you consciously putting some thought into that?
See, yeah, that's a bigger issue. But yes, like when we are talking about sustainable development in general, both at a micro level and a macro level, we do need to be conscious about greenhouse gases and whether we are supporting those kind of things. So it does support alternate energy ventures like solar, wind, as well as micro hydro and so on. We are interested in those directions.
Right. Then I heard you saying that problems are interconnected, so must be the solutions, and we also know that both the problems and solutions they don't have boundaries like they used to have. They, especially during in this globalization time. For example, we are seeing how Monsanto and Walmart, they can have an impact in India, even though they are U.S. corporations. And then, so are you planning to go beyond India is my question. And an added question to that is where you envisioned, I guess, more than almost 24 years ago. And now you have 50 chapters and you are still growing. So where do you want to get in maybe next 20 or maybe next 10 or 20 years? Or not personally you, but where do you want aid to get? Maybe you'll have to change the name of aid if you're going to go international, but that's probably an easier problem to have.
No, yeah. So I think the international evolution of aid has to happen. I mean, aid itself, of course, would be focused on India. For example, like you'll be happy to know that a few years ago, in Boston, a group started called Association for the Development of Pakistan, and these are people who from Pakistan who saw some of their volunteers in Boston and were very inspired and therefore talked to us about how to start a non-profit here for doing similar work in Pakistan, and we kind of gave them some initial know-how on that. And I think now that's a fairly well-established group with its website and so on. So I do think that we become examples of how such other groups can be formed for other countries by people from those regions taking the initiative. The other thing is also that is also the aid needs to grow international in different ways. For example, there was a retired professor who came to the talk yesterday in UCLA, and he was telling us, looking at some of our education charts that we had put up, about our education program in India, he was saying, why does it look to me that you are trying to copy the American system? Why don't you look at what Cuba is doing? Because the model in Cuba is more suited for India. And he said you should go and visit the Cuban embassy and find out how their social programs are run. So I think we also do need to look at what the rest of the world in other countries are doing, whether it's in Brazil. He was from Brazil, other countries are doing, and see if aid, being an organization that started in the U.S., is not carrying only some Indian and U.S. style of doing things, but it's also getting enriched by what progressive groups across the world have done. Like that enrichment is also there in aid. We need to make special efforts to do that. The other direction Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. No, the other direction in which we have evolved a little bit, where more needs to be done, is also in there's one chapter of aid, for example, which was started by Americans. I mean, not Indian origin Americans, but by Americans in Pennsylvania, in one of the places in Pennsylvania, I think Louisburg. So we do have we do need to kind of make aid more so that the non-Indian origin society in the U.S. also feels welcome and participates and can contribute both as volunteers and as donors to our cause.
Yeah, and at some point, I guess there is a need for to go for an organization like aid to go international, because I'll quote a very recent example. The garment factory accidents that we are seeing in Bangladesh, there's a lot more business coming into Bangladesh, and because of they're moving from China to Bangladesh. Maybe it's getting a little more expensive in China, or maybe there are a little more tougher laws. Now there is a movement in Bangladesh, they want to make tougher laws, and they're demanding more pay. Now they can go into a different country, and they're going to exploit it there. So I guess there's a need for especially organizations like aid to go beyond the boundaries. But I'll let you wrap it up. Tell me if I did not ask any question. Feel free to give information on that, and also if you can give a message to the listeners of NRI Summer. And we have a lot of folks in the U.S. and also India and other countries as well.
Yeah, I think I'd say that, the website of aid is aidindia.org, aidindia.org. So if people want to, get involved both as volunteers or to contribute in any way, I think the website will be able to tell you about local chapters and so on. I welcome everybody who's interested in, volunteering for aid to join. I think as far as NRI Summer goes, I think you've done an excellent job, because I think the media, a lot of media is sold out to corporate interests, and a lot of stories don't come out, and a lot of time is wasted on cricket and Bollywood and so on, while you all have focused on real issues in India and also internationally, I guess. So I think that's a really important, and obviously NRI Summer cannot do that without its listeners supporting that. So I think both the listeners as well as people producing NRI Summer, I think it's a very, very good initiative, and I hope more listeners also join to just let it be known that when such shows come, they won't go unheard. Because it takes a lot of effort to create such a show, and they must be heard. So I hope you get more listeners.
All right. Thank you very much, Ravi, and also Aravinda. And I wish very successful rest of the tour for you in U.S. And folks, the website name again is aidindia.org. So aidindia.org. Please go there and see if you can participate, if you can join a local chapter, find out where the local folks are, or even if you want to make a donation, you can't spend a lot of time. You want to make a donation, I think this is the right channel for you. All right, with that, I'll wrap it up. Thanks very much, Ravi.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Friends, if you liked today's show, please go to youtube.com/NRISamay and click on the subscribe button. You will get notified every time we publish a new show. And you can also like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Google+.